one thing that, sometimes schools are lacking is just the shout outs for your staff. So is there a way to give a shout out this week to, somebody in your district or your school building that just gives it all, their all, and just a simple thank you?
Well, welcome back, everybody, to this episode of Leading Through Unprecedented Times. And wow, is today's conversation going to be incredibly relevant for the work that you lead, the work that you do each and every day. I could not be more excited to introduce you today to the one and only Andrea Gribble. Andrea, how you doing, my friend?
I am good. Good morning from Wisconsin.
Awesome. So listen, we've been connected for a whole bunch of years. I know we did some work together back in COVID. And when I think about social media in schools, I think of you towards the very top of the list because you are working constantly with so many school and district leaders around the country that I wanted to ask you to be part of this podcast because, man, I think if we look around a little bit, social media is an interesting spot, right? We've got places telling their story, sharing incredible work, but we also have some people behind the screens that are really struggling with, do I hit send? Do I hit tweet? Do I not? What's coming? Who's going to follow up? And so I am excited to dive in. Give our listeners, if you would, just a little bit of history, who you are, the work that you do, and then we're going to dive in.
Yeah, well, my name's Andrea Gribble. I run a company called Social School for EDU, and I got started back 9 years ago. I love serving schools across the country, and I've just learned a whole bunch about social media. And Tom, I manage social media every single day for a school district, Little New Auburn, Wisconsin, which isn't very far from our dear friend Joe Sanfilippo's school. We're not quite as big as the hashtag Go Crickets, but we've got a great story to tell, and it has been such a blessing to be part of that ride and see how that the stories have been elevated through channels like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram over the last 9 years.
Yeah. So let's say I'm a school and district leader that comes to you and says, hey, I'm taking a new principalship, a new superintendency. I'm really hesitant about the social media piece. Yet, you and I are very active users. We use it heavily. For people that may be anxious about doing it, how do they go from that to being their storyteller in chief? Tell us about the power of social media and how school and districts can really leverage it.
Well, I think, all the listeners know that people are talking about your school, whether you are doing it or not. And the story they tell is probably not the best one. We've got this free tool in our hand with social media, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or others, where we can highlight all of the creative, awesome things that not only our students are doing, but our staff is doing. I think, where many principals and superintendents struggle is, a system of how to get those stories out there. And then what happens, they're always fear stops them, right? They're scared of the negative comments. I used to say before COVID, 99% of comments were positive. Now I say 92%. Let's be realistic, right? But most of it still is really positive. And if you've got a plan of how you're going to deal with negativity or with challenges, and sometimes a little bit of a negative comment or insight is good. It's an opportunity to listen to see, geez, maybe we need to communicate better. Some cases it's just nasty and attacking a student or staff member or something like that. And then that's why we have commenting guidelines to kind of guide us in our work so that we can make the right decisions when those situations come up.
Yeah, you're actually making me think beyond being a school and district leader to even being a dad. I was sharing before we hit record of my daughter at 13 years old, just starting a YouTube channel all about her riding horses. But it's funny because based on what you just said, I find myself constantly saying, honey, someday you're going to get a comment that is not going to be true. And trying to protect her heart, right? And recognize it's coming because the nonsense is out there. My thought being help prepare her for the day that it comes. She can laugh and being like, hey, daddy, that's what you're talking about, isn't it? Right? As opposed to shutting down, being like, you know what? They don't like it. I'm not good enough. My video wasn't good enough. I'm not a good enough horse rider, all that stuff. And Now maximize that when it's somebody's job in a community that can be highly political, and it's really the same thing. So I'm wondering, because you and your team work with so many school and district leaders across the country, what are some of the questions that you're getting? I mean, when we look about election season and just the chaos of things on social media, things that are so ridiculously untrue, things that may be true, but maybe hurtful, maybe harmful, maybe, it's all out there. Walk us through, what are some of the common questions or issues that are coming up, or when people pick up the phone to call you or your team and say, I don't know how to handle this. What would you do? What are some of those things look like?
Well, I think one of the big ones, and again, it goes back to the fear is, can I turn comments off? You're just afraid of what's going to be out there. And I hate to tell you guys, but social media is actually meant to be social. The first word is social. So you actually want interaction. And so, my best advice, and certainly over the last 3 years, has been you don't have to put everything on social media. There's direct communication. You have emails, you have text messages, you have your website. There might be things that you communicate on those channels and not on social media, because while Facebook now does allow you to turn off comments on select posts on Facebook, your followers know that. So if all of a sudden they can't comment, they're like, what is the school hiding? And so rather than do that, I think it's better to just choose the right channel. I think other people are really struggling with just finding the time to do it all, do it well, find the stories. And that's really where you need to build a system where everybody gets to be part of the storytelling, process, but not everybody has access to your channels, because there's district voice, there's the ways of handling comments, and there's some things that you have to be careful of. I'm going to give you this example. This is a funny example, Tom. Some of our kids were playing a game, and it was like you bounced a ball in a cup. But to me, Tom, I graduated in 1996. To me, it
I
looked
know where
a
you're
lot.
going, Andrea. I know where you're going.
Yeah, it looked like beer pong, right? It looked like beer pong, and I'm from Wisconsin,
Yeah. I
we're
had
like
no
the
idea what
beer
you were
capital.
talking about there, but I'll leave that. Maybe our listeners had an idea where you started to go with that one, right?
Yeah, and so I'm just like, I'm not gonna put that out there because then all of a sudden we're gonna start getting comments. Or, what shirts they're wearing, or even we just had a story from somebody who had shared a picture and a girl was crying in the background, and they didn't realize it. And that parent saw that picture and was like, oh my gosh. Now, if you don't deal with the comments every day, you're not going to realize that. I mean, our staff is doing a lot. And so that's why it's nice to have kind of one person in charge, but not in charge of gathering all the content. And so that's just really important to get everybody involved, but then put it out in a way with someone that has like a lot of knowledge and experience with how to look for those things. Now, I don't bat 1,000. I could probably tell you, 100 things right now that I've done wrong on social media. And by the way, if you do social media, you're going to make mistakes and everybody's going to see it. That's just the way it is. We're human. As much as AI is a great thing, as far as being future ready schools, it can be a great tool. It also, we are human and we have to remain human. Really that authentic piece, as you wrote about so eloquently in your book, is really important for schools because people can tell if you're not being authentic and you're not telling that real story.
Yeah. So you started to lead into something that I actually really wanted to ask you about that I've been thinking about, even at Future Ready and All for Ed, we wrestle with it internally, is you're talking about kind of who's putting that message out. What's that line of communication, almost chain of command internally. I love that notion of, this isn't about one person and they're supposed to run around a district and find all the stories because it's just not possible. Right. Yet at the same time, if we're not careful, as much as I love sports, if all they ever see is sports on a social media channel, that's all they think that we value, right? And if we're not careful, maybe it's football or baseball or whatever it is. Again, those were my things, but why does this district only share about these particular sports? And it just happened to be those are the coaches that were running it. And do we do anything academically and how quickly that can go? So if I'm a superintendent about to, work with your team or whatever it might be, what do you advise them on how to set up that type of chain of command so there is some sort of filtering system, so the messages that are going out are really, filtered in some way so that it makes sense, so our message and the brand that we'd want to portray is there. How do you advise them on that, on what that looks like internally? What recommendations do you have?
Well, when I talk about social media, I'm really talking about the entire school entity or the school district. Now, I know, not every school is like mine, Tom. 300 kids K through 12. Yes, that's right. 300 students in one building, K through 12th grade. I know that there's a lot bigger schools out there, but it's important to have that strong district presence on social media. Definitely having that Facebook page, but how do we celebrate everything that's going on? Well, my biggest recommendation is setting up an email address, social media at yourschool.org or whatever your domain is, right? And you ask your staff, you train your staff, hey, send in one thing a month. If all of our staff sends in one thing a month to this email address with a picture or a short video and a little description, it goes to that one email address. And then you have someone on the end of that email address that luckily gets to keep those things separate from all the other emails they get, Tom, because you get a lot of emails in a day. So let's have a special spot for the social media items. And then that person is responsible for taking a look at it, scheduling it out, putting it in a engaging voice, using emojis and asking questions and scheduling them at the right times. That person really is responsible for that part. And then they also monitor comments. It allows everybody to be part of telling the story, but you still have some control over what exactly is going out, because sometimes you do have to say no, or you have to second guess because, again, you have to deal with the comments. A form can work. There's certainly platforms out there. There's software that can help with that. There's different apps and websites that make it a little bit easier, but I really recommend that at some point there's an approval process, just so that as much as we want to trust our teachers and everything, and I certainly am a proponent of using social media. If teachers are using Twitter in the classrooms and tweeting out about their class, that's great. But when you go to put it on, kind of that district school-wide, lens, you just want to be careful. I think it's good to be cautious and again, have that brand identity, because brand is more than just a logo, right? It's the way we talk about our schools, ourselves, our staff. And so that'd be my best recommendation. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, we're capturing all these great things. And me as one person, if I'm the principal running the page, or I am a school PR person, or if I am a secretary or a media specialist, again, I can't be everywhere, but there's awesome things happening all the time. And so that really sets up a recurring system of flow of content to share out with your community.
Yeah, such great advice there. You referenced Joe Sanfilippo, one of our future ready advisors and good friends. And, one of the things he talks about often that I love is how in the absence of knowledge, people make up their own, and in the average day, parents aren't in our schools. And if we're not sharing that story, one of the things I always like to talk about in talking about this topic is, I referenced my daughter earlier and my son the same way. When they come home from school on a given day, I'll ask them, Paisley, how was school today? And she'll say good. She'll say fine. By the way, she loves school, loves her teachers, does great. Paisley, what'd you do today? Nothing, which always makes me laugh, because if that's all I asked and I kept the conversation right there, I'd get the impression she goes in, she sits in a chair, she does that for 7 hours, and she comes home and she does that for 180 days a year. But because her teachers communicate well, and yes, leverage social media, but also leverage certain apps that are just more class contained for parents and where the privacy there and things like that. And now I can pull out my phone and say, well, that's really interesting, honey, because here you are in science class, and show her the phone. And what were you doing? And what happens? She can't stop talking about it because the story was told, right? Which gives us as parents, and also I would say it builds trust, because it allows us to see, it gives us a glimpse into what happens every single day. Because to Joe's point and to Joe's quote, if they don't know, they're going to make up what we do, right? And so, in thinking about that, we think about future ready. What do you see in the future for social media and for schools? Walk me down 4 or 5 years from now. What do you see almost being the norm? What would be some best practice? What do you see coming?
Well, it's hard to go that far out, right? I mean, a year ago with all the AI, advancements, we wouldn't be able to guess where we are right now. So, that's an interesting question. But just looking out a little bit, I really see being able to leverage storytellers within your school with students. I was just in a classroom yesterday and I loved it, talking to a social media marketing class, and these kids are learning about social media. These kids are experts, Tom. I mean, they are literally, watching TikTok, and they're able to make short videos. And I'm not saying your school needs to be on TikTok, but Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels is just like TikTok, but it's on those channels. So if you're not leveraging that way of, communicating, I, as a 45-year-old mom, still enjoy some of those videos, right? And while that might be overwhelming for me as a principal or a school communicator to be like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to make things cool or whatever, these kids are experts, and their phones are such amazing tools. They can create them all there. So I think really, really leveraging their voice is a wave of the future. And it's not just like something that's nice to have, it's something that you're going to need to have. I mean, it's just as if when you want to go to a restaurant, are you going to talk to the restaurant owners, or are you going to talk to somebody that actually went to eat there? You're going to talk to the person who went to eat there. So we should be talking to the students about their experience and let them tell you what they're learning, how they're growing, the connections they're making. That's a real opportunity that just needs to be leaned into by schools, and some schools are doing it already, which is awesome. But I think definitely as you look forward, you need to look at how to incorporate that.
Yeah, you're making me think of two different conversations I've had in the recent years, recent years, I guess recent months, really per se. One, a conversation with a principal where they were doing just that, and they have these social media ambassadors. They announce kind of that morning, today's school's take over by so and so and a couple students, and of course they do all the stuff they need to do on the back end. Obviously, they're changing passwords and they're doing all the different things they need to do, and they're telling parents and they're laying out expectations. And here's what we knew. But one of the things they said, his key takeaway was that they realized very quickly what the students were capturing and what the adults were capturing were very different things. And so, what students were looking for through their eyes, and we as adults were, which shares such a powerful piece to the story. So, what a neat way to do some of the social media takeovers with kids. And certainly, we've got to abide by any guidelines, laws, rules, and that kind of stuff. We've got to be very conscious of that. But that was super important, and just it was such a realization in that principal's mind. Another conversation I had with a principal recently was they were been working on culture and working on how do we continue to build culture. And the conversation I was asking them about, because there was a conversation around athletics too, and things they were trying to do at sporting events and all that. But we talked about exactly what you're talking about is kids are doing it anyway. Kids are creating reels for their football. I want to commit here, do this there, right? And so the opportunity for students, and imagine partnering that marketing class with what you were saying with sports teams. They go to girls volleyball and they go to, basketball, boys basketball this week. And they're spotlighting a player, spotlighting a season, spotlighting a win, whatever it might be. Here's ads coming up, come to our games, all created by kids, and the amazing power in that stuff gets me excited, because you talk about student voice, you talk about giving them real world skills for the future, just what you're talking about, and just relevant conversations I've had in the past few months with principals. So let me ask you, one of the things our listeners might be thinking, especially if they're not active social media users, how do you balance it all with so many platforms? Like, it seems like every week a new platform comes out. My daughter's talking about Be Real, and she has to go do her Be Real in the next 5 minutes, and she's got to do that. And they're using TikTok and Instagram and Reels and Facebook and Twitter. And if I'm a listener that's still a little hesitant, that overwhelms me. What recommendations do you have for school and district leaders when there's so many tools in so many places? Where do they start?
Well, you've got to look at what audience are you trying to reach? because there's different audiences on every platform. And certainly there are mega users like our kids that are using a lot of different platforms. But you really need to prioritize. And I always tell people, like, if I start teaching about Instagram and Instagram Reels and it makes you feel like you need to breathe into a paper bag, like, just go back to Facebook and do Facebook really well. I work with hundreds of schools. The number one platform, hands down, is Facebook. You're reaching your parents, you're reaching your grandparents, your community members. 70% of your community doesn't have anybody in schools, but they're likely on Facebook. Even our students, even though they might not be posting a ton on Facebook, they have Facebook profiles. So they are there as well. So I think if you have limited time, do Facebook well. And if you're doing right now, I've got a lot of people that are like, Twitter just doesn't seem to be where our people are at. Okay, shut down. You don't have to shut down your Twitter account. What you can do is you can pin to the top of your page and say, hey, this page, this Twitter account is not currently active. To see what's happening in our school, jump over to Facebook and give them the link and leave that pin to the top of your page. And maybe in another year or two, once you get things going, you can figure out how to balance all of that. But that's why the word while keeping your sanity is in my newest book, because social media can be so overwhelming and feel like you're always trying to catch up and you're always, I mean, just like your daughter. I do Be Real, by the way, because it kind of helps me stalk my girls and know what they're doing. So Tom, you might want to get on there and just be friends with them
Yeah,
because
full disclosure, I'm the same way, Andrea. So
yeah.
yeah, I totally agree.
So anyways, there's just reasons to focus and do Facebook really well before you branch out. And if you're able to, I mean, there are ways to incorporate. A lot of people are like, do I have to post something different on every single channel? And because of the algorithm, that people aren't going to see everything you post. And most people have a favorite social media channel. So I'm 45, so my favorite is still Facebook. If I was a 35-year-old mom, maybe it's Instagram. So it's not a major sin or anything to put the same type of content out on multiple channels. You certainly only have so much time during the day, but there's a huge opportunity to reach thousands of people. And I was just talking with somebody and they're like, even if we only reach two more people with the stories that are happening in our school, if we got to have two more conversations in a day with somebody to tell them what's happening in our school, wouldn't we have those two conversations? With social media, we've literally got the chance for thousands. I mean, my little school district in New Auburn, we reach over 5,000 people a week. We only have 500 people in our whole town. We're 10xing the reach that we're able to get with the stories that are being told. And it's sports stories, it's academic stories, it's, kids helping other kids, it's going to business, career opportunities. All of the things are being shared and people are seeing the awesome opportunities at our school.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the passion. And you just mentioned in passing, I put in my book, and you're a super humble person. So you happen to mention just in passing, but I actually want to give you a shout out because you actually did just write a book on this topic called Social Media for Schools. So, number one, as an author to an author, congrats, because I know the blood, sweat, and tears that go into something like that. So, congrats on that. But what an incredible resource for school and district leaders. Give us just a quick shout out, if you would. Tell us about just what are some of the key themes, topics, and obviously we've walked through some on the podcast here, just things that I know folks are talking about and asking out there. But how did you break it down? What are some relevant pieces for our leaders to be thinking about?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to provide a guide of what works for schools. I've been working in schools for 9 years now. I'm still learning every single day. I couldn't put a lot of the how tos because just Meta and Twitter, they change all the time. But I really wanted to boil down the common things that schools are getting wrong and that they need help with. I've got 5 sections in the book, and it starts out with just systems, building the right systems for storytelling. Then we get into branding. Then we get into storytelling, how to tell that story. I share some best practices, and that has to do with negativity. It has to do with writing good captions. It has to do with video. And then I finish with professional development, which is things like this, listening to podcasts and learning from others. But definitely with social media, you can't just say, I've arrived. I know everything there is to know about social media. Not going to happen. Used to freak me out. But then I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's all these people that are telling stories every day around the country. We can learn from one another. And what I love about schools is, people working in schools are so giving. It's not like corporate America where you're trying to keep your secrets and whatever. Like, we're sharing all the secrets. This works really well for our school. So why don't you try it? And Barbara Hunter, who runs the NSPRA, the NSPRA group, she says admire and acquire. So you can admire something, you can use it for your school, and so that's really powerful. So that's really why I wanted to write this book, to have kind of a guidebook, because most people, Tom, get thrown into social media for a school with no formal training. And if you listen to how they train for businesses, I just had somebody reach out, and it was just Teacher Appreciation Week not too long ago. And somebody said, well, they said we could only post once a day. Otherwise, it's going to wreck the algorithm. I said, well, that is true if you are a business, because you're trying to sell something and you don't want to post too often. For schools, I mean, we're averaging 3 posts a day. We're reaching 5,000 people a week. You would not say that's hurting our algorithm, right? We've got great stories to tell. We need to tell them. And so that's why I wanted to get this this resource out, so that people could see what is really truly working, and then build on it, make it better, and then come back and tell me about it, because we can all learn things from one another.
Well, I love the work that you're leading and tackling some of the challenging issues that are out there, especially for our superintendents, especially for our principals, constantly feeling like they're under attack whenever they put their hesitant to hit send because some of those things, but yet still staying focused on kids, focused on academics, focused on the great things, and shining a spotlight on each and everything that happens in the best way we can, with some best practices there. So great work with all of that. Our next school year here is right around the corner already. As they're gearing up for the coming year, what recommendation do you have to start the year strong, make some of those impressions, get parents connected? What do you advise some districts there?
Well, I really recommend having at least 10 minutes of your in-service convocation, whatever, where you've got everybody, all the staff, your bus drivers, your paras, everybody, and you talk about the importance of telling your story, and you let them know how they can be involved. So for us, it's, hey, snap that picture. Here's the email address. Okay. Yes, we have to be aware of who can't be pictured on social media and some of those things, and then show them what some good stories are and the reach they got. So as when you run a page, I get to see, oh my gosh, that reached 2,000 people. That's amazing, right? People that are on the other end don't get to see that impact. So if you're just able to show a few snapshots of, look at this story from Mrs. Nearing's classroom from last year, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I have things like that's happening in my classroom, right? So I think if you can show them how to get involved and show them examples of what they can, of what has worked well, will really help. And then just remind them of your social media channels and say, hey, your interaction on these channels matter too. We've got a teacher, Mrs. McFall in New Auburn, that literally comments on everything. She is so positive. I love her. I just want to give her a huge hug. She was my youngest daughter's kindergarten teacher. And, that's such great reflection on the school too. And that interaction matters, because the comments and shares and likes and stuff that come in on your page tell Facebook, hey, this post is important. I'm going to show it to more people. So I think if you can do those 3 things, that'll really get you set off on the right foot, because the excitement is at an all-time high when you get back to school in the fall.
Absolutely. Great advice for the coming weeks. Let me ask you actually 2 final questions. One being, if people want to reach out, they want to get connected with you, they want to follow your work, where can they best do that?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Andrea Gribble. And then you can check out all the things on my website, socialschool4edu.com. That's the number 4. So
Awesome. So final piece of advice for any school or district leader that's listening to the podcast, whether they're a super user with tens of thousands of followers, or they're just signing up because they've been listening to you and the power of social media, what can happen? Give me a piece of advice for them.
I'd say one thing that, sometimes schools are lacking is just the shout outs for your staff. So, is there a way to give a shout out this week to, somebody in your district or your school building that just gives it all, their all, and just a simple like thank you? That will do so much. It'll do so much for you because you maybe tell them thank you, but when we can extend that and then other people get to say thank you, that's powerful. So whether it's, if you're listening to this in the summer and it's somebody that works all year long and people don't even realize that, Mrs. Johnson here at the front desk actually works all year long. Maybe it's a shout out about that. Maybe it's a shout out to your custodial crew. Get that started and see some of that positivity. Some of those posts are the best posts that we share for social media, and they're really important. So just do it. Even one story a week can get you started on the right path, and then you'll see, hey, it's not that bad. There's a lot of good out there. So that'd be my challenge to the listeners.
Absolutely love that. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with all the work that you're doing to whether get people started or just to continue sharing their story and doing the incredible work. That's Andrea Gribble, everybody. Andrea, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.